Hello, guys. Hope you're doing well. So today we're thinking about the Acts reading for this Sunday, which is the sixth Sunday of Easter. So what happens is that after the stoning of Stephen, persecution breaks out against the church in Jerusalem because, at least in part, they got away with it. They were not allowed to carry out the death penalty under Roman rule, and yet they did, and there was no blowback for it. So they decided, okay, we can persecute the church now. There's no nothing to hinder us from doing that. It's when Paul begins his persecution and all that. And so what happens then is the odd thing, which is that the disciples, the apostles, stay in Jerusalem and everybody else scatters. The very people who were told to scatter, wait until you've received power from on high, and then the missionary impulse is supposed to kick in. You're supposed to go. That's exactly what Jesus says in Matthew 28 in the Great Commission: go and make disciples of all nations. The apostles stayed. And so what we see then, so we know the apostles stayed. So then we see Philip, who's one of the deacons that we read about. And he's got to be one of the deacons because we're told the apostles stayed. So he goes to Samaria. Well, why? Well, I think for two reasons. One is they're sort of the long lost Jews at some level. They are, kind of the cousins that you want to push to the background and not admit to be in your family, and also because Jesus had been there in John 4 and had a great harvest when he was there. And so Philip probably thinking, hey, this shooting fish in a barrel, I'll go on out there and tell him the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey would have said. So he does. And he finds a willing audience. They listen to this. They believe everything he has to say. They send back and say, okay, this is a two-part process, it seems. We need you to send some apostles out here to lay hands on these people, which is exactly what we do in liturgical churches, right? We prepare people for confirmation, and then the bishop comes, and the bishop lays hands on them, prays that they receive the Holy Spirit, and so it was my job as the leader of the local church to prepare people for confirmation into the larger denomination. So that's exactly what Philip has done. He has prepared the ground, gotten these people ready, and now here come the apostles. So and they come out, lay hands on them, and they receive the Holy Spirit. And there's evidence that they received the Holy Spirit. But this thing is that sometimes, I mean, sometimes we need things to be difficult. We just do. We fuss and kick and scream about how hard it is, and no, I'm not going to get a fair hearing. I'm not going to do this, that, and the other thing, and it's so hard here. And what we're going to see tomorrow has to do with Peter talking about being persecuted for righteousness' sake, and so that's what's happening. They're being persecuted for righteousness' sake, and so they say, all right, it's time to go someplace where we're not, at least yet, being persecuted. So Philip goes to Samaria, sees his harvest, and then God moves him somewhere else, and he meets the Ethiopian eunuch, and then sends him away back to Ethiopia. And the Ethiopian church is an incredible example of the perseverance of the Christian church. If there are maps, and I'd have to go look see if I can find one now, but that will show the rise and retreat of Christianity. And what you'll see during the period of huge Muslim expansion, um, before the Crusades, you'll see there's one place that really persevered better than anybody else, and that was Ethiopia. They they continued to persevere in spite of the persecution, in spite of the fact that they're people were being converted at the edge of the sword and all that kind of stuff. And so it's an amazing thing. So Philip's impact, this deacon Philip's impact, was great. But what was the motivation that got him to go out there? It was the persecution. And so sometimes I think what the church needs to do is the church needs to recognize sometimes that the persecution that it feels maybe is God's way of getting them to get out of their comfort zone, and get into the world. It's been that true for me. I mean, to get me to go to seminary required a heck of a lot of pressure, and I didn't really enjoy it. And I thought that God was, being mean to me at some level. And and what I didn't realize is that what he wanted for me was so much better than where I was, that it was ridiculous. And so he pushed me by making my life more difficult. And sometimes we need to stop, and when we're having difficult times, we need to stop and say, God, what are you doing? Are you doing something here, or is this external? So, because you see it again and again that God used the Babylonians to shake up the Israelites, and they had to go into exile in order that they might be purified. Well, sometimes that's required. I hate it, but dadgum, I'm stubborn and I get set in my ways and I forget sometimes and I lose track of what I need to do because I get too comfortable doing what I am doing. And sometimes God allows this kind of stuff to happen in order that we can be out there bearing fruit and we can change. And at 65, I'm less a fan of change than I used to be, but I'm ready for change right now. Sometimes we have to get ready for change before God brings it about. And most of the time, if we allow it, that change can bring a new fruitfulness in our lives. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.